Captain Zinna stood on the bridge of the sleek starship Fury's wing, her yellow eyes narrowing as the frozen moon loomed ahead. The planet, with its jagged cliffs and swirling winds of ice, seemed lifeless, but somewhere beneath its surface lay a base, ancient and forgotten. The rebellion she fought for had sent her here to retrieve a legendary weapon, something that could turn the tide in their favor. "We're coming in close," Garaf growled, his large Endurian frame barely fitting into the ship's control center. His forearms flexed in anticipation, clearly ready for a fight. If this so-called weapon is here, it better be worth the trip. I didn't travel across 3 systems for a ghost story. Tynix, their tech specialist, flicked her slender fingers across a holographic screen. "I'm not picking up any life signs, but there's a faint energy signature coming from deep within the base. It's old tech, but it's still functional." Zinna nodded. "Land us near the main entrance. We don't have time for subtlety. If the core tracks us here, this whole mission is over before it begins." The ship descended, landing smoothly on a cracked and weathered platform. As the crew disembarked, their boots crunched on the frozen surface, their breath misting in the frigid air. Ahead of them, the entrance to the base was sealed, rusted over from centuries of neglect. Tynix knelt by the door, pulling out a small device and attaching it to the control panel. Her fingers danced over the keys as she worked to bypass the ancient security system. Garaf tapped his foot impatiently. "Can't you go any faster, techie? If this thing is as powerful as they say, we're not the only ones looking for it." "I'm going as fast as I can, Garaf," Tynix muttered, focusing intently. "This system is old, and the encryption is strange." Zinna glanced around, her instincts telling her something was off. The moon was too quiet. She placed a hand on the hilt of her weapon, ready for anything. Suddenly, the door hissed and slid open. A cold gust of air rushed out from the darkened interior, carrying the scent of metal and dust. "Finally," Garaf grunted, pushing past Tynix. "Let's find this weapon and get out of here." They entered cautiously, the dim emergency lights flickering to life as they moved deeper into the facility. The corridors were eerily silent, their steps echoing off the metal walls. The deeper they went, the more Zinna felt a strange presence, as if they were being watched. Tynix stopped suddenly, her head cocked to the side. "Do you hear that?" Before anyone could answer, a voice echoed through the corridor, smooth and emotionless. "Welcome, travelers. I have been expecting you." Zinna's hand flew to her weapon. "Who are you? Show yourself." The voice chuckled softly. "There's no need for hostility. I am Serian, the caretaker of this facility. If you are here, you must be seeking the weapon." Garaf's fists clenched. "Where is it? We don't have time for games." "Patience, Endurian," Serian replied, his tone calm. "You seek something far more valuable than any traditional weapon. Follow the lights, and all will be revealed." Before they could respond, the lights along the floor began to pulse, leading them deeper into the base. Zinna exchanged a wary glance with Tynix, who simply shrugged. "We've come this far," Tynix said. "Might as well see what's waiting for us." Zinna nodded, though her instincts screamed that this mission was about to get far more complicated than they had anticipated. They followed the lights, the eerie glow casting long shadows as they moved deeper into the bowels of the base. The cold, sterile air seemed to press in around them, and Zinna couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was observing their every move. As they rounded a final corner, the lights led them to a massive door, far larger than any they had encountered before. This one wasn't rusted or damaged. It looked as though it had been maintained for centuries. "This is it," Serian's voice whispered through the speakers. "The weapon you seek lies beyond this door." Garaf cracked his knuckles, ready for whatever awaited them. "Open it." The door creaked and groaned, slowly sliding open to reveal a large chamber. In the center of the room stood a single cryostasis pod, its surface frosted over from millennia of disuse. Zinna stepped forward, her eyes widening in disbelief as she read the ancient script on the pod. "Human," she whispered. "The weapon is a human." The words hung in the air like a spectre, sending a shiver through the group. Gorath scoffed, crossing his arms over his massive chest. "A human. This is the ancient weapon we've been chasing across the galaxy." Tenix, fascinated, approached the Cryostasis pod, her eyes scanning the faint hum of the technology keeping its occupant preserved. "This tech is far older than anything we've seen in the rebellion. It's incredible, but a human. They're extinct." Zinna stepped closer, wiping the frost from the viewing glass. Inside, a figure lay still, humanoid with defined features, but larger and more robust than she had expected. His face was peaceful, despite the centuries he had been sealed away. Serian's voice crackled back to life. "Not extinct, merely forgotten. Humans were once the greatest warriors in the galaxy, feared by all. But war, it changed them. It changed everything. This one is special, though. He was chosen to survive." "Why?" Zen asked, keeping her hand on her weapon. "Why was he left here, locked away for all this time?" "Because he is not just a soldier," Serian replied. "He is the last of a force that could reshape the galaxy. But such power comes at a cost. Humanity was lost to its own ambition, consumed by the very war they fought to control. This one was saved for a time when the galaxy would need him most. That time is now." Gorath growled in frustration. "Enough riddles. Can he help us defeat the core or not?" There was a pause, as if Serian was considering how to answer. "That depends on whether he chooses to help you. I cannot make that decision for him. But I warn you, once you awaken him, you cannot predict what he will do." Zinna's mind raced. Could this human really be the key to winning the war? She had read the legends of humanity's strength and resilience, their unparalleled ability to adapt and survive. But those were stories, fantasies told to frighten children into behaving. The reality was standing before her now, encased in a forgotten pod. Tenix, meanwhile, was already at work. "I'm accessing the pod's systems. I can wake him, but we need to be sure this is what we want to do." Zinna hesitated. There was something unsettling about this. A human, an ancient, powerful being who had been deemed dangerous enough to be locked away for eternity. Was this truly the answer? Or were they about to unleash something far worse than the core? "We don't have time for this," Gorath grunted. "The core is already on our trail. If this human is the weapon we need, then wake him up. If not, we find another way." Zinna weighed the decision for a moment longer before nodding. "Do it, Tenix." Tenix's fingers flew over the pod's control panel, inputting the codes to override the cryostasis lock. As the system began to hum to life, Serian's voice came back, more urgent this time. "Be careful, Captain. He's not like anything you've encountered before." The pod hissed, steam pouring from its edges as the ancient machinery groaned and creaked. The frost on the glass began to melt away, revealing more of the figure inside. The human's chest rose slightly, his first breath in countless centuries. Suddenly, his eyes snapped open, cold, calculating, and filled with a depth that sent a chill down Zinna's spine. The pod door slid open, and the human stepped out, his movements slow and deliberate, as if testing his muscles after so long in stasis. Gorath stepped forward, towering over the human, but the human barely glanced at him. His attention was on Zinna, his sharp gaze studying her. "Who are you?" His voice was low, rough from disuse. Zinna stood her ground. "Captain Zinna of the Rebellion. We came here searching for a weapon, something that could help us defeat the core." The human's eyes flickered with recognition at the mention of the core. "The core still exists." His voice held a trace of bitterness. "Yes," Zinna said. "They've grown even more powerful. Entire species are enslaved, systems stripped of resources. We're fighting back, but we're losing. We need your help." The human exhaled slowly, looking around at the sterile, cold facility that had been his prison for so long. "I see. You woke me because you think I can help you in your war." Zinna nodded. We need you. The galaxy needs you. He paused, considering her words. Then, with a tired sigh, he said, I've fought enough wars. I've seen enough destruction. I'm not sure I'm the answer you're looking for. Gorath growled in frustration. We didn't come all this way for you to refuse us. You're supposed to be the weapon that saves us. The human's eyes snapped to Gorath, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of something dangerous in them. I was a weapon once, he said, his voice hard. But I'm not a weapon anymore. Zinna stepped between them. We don't want to force you into anything, but we believe you can help. Please, at least consider it. The human stared at her for a long moment, then finally nodded. I'll consider it. But understand this. If I fight, it's on my terms. I've seen enough of what war does to the innocent. Zinna nodded in understanding, relieved that he hadn't outright refused. But as she looked into his eyes, she couldn't shake the feeling that this human was far more dangerous than anything they had ever encountered. The cold air in the facility seemed to thicken with tension as the human, Marcus, as he finally revealed his name, stepped away from the cryopod. His movements were slow, measured, as if every action was being carefully considered. Zinna could see the weight of countless years, battles, and loss etched into his face. Tenix, standing to the side, was staring at Marcus like he was a relic from another time, and in a way he was. Your stasis pod is unlike anything we've seen before, she said, her voice filled with curiosity. How long have you been in there? Marcus rubbed his wrists, still adjusting to being out of cryo. Time doesn't mean much when you're in a pod, but if I had to guess, centuries. It was supposed to be permanent, until the war was over. He let out a dark laugh, as if the concept of war ever ending was a cruel joke. I see that didn't happen. Why were you left here? Zinna asked, stepping forward. Why hide away someone like you when the galaxy needed help? Marcus gave her a long, unreadable look before answering. Because we lost. Humanity was broken, shattered by the very wars we were created to win. We were unstoppable. At least that's what they told us. But the cost was too high. My kind, we were soldiers, yes, but also something more. We were engineered, built to be the perfect fighters. Too good, in fact. Tenix, still absorbed in analyzing the systems of the facility, looked up at him. Engineered? Like a bioweapon. Marcus nodded slowly. In a sense, we were the pinnacle of human evolution, modified to be the best at what we did. Faster, stronger, smarter. But that kind of power comes at a cost. Humanity couldn't handle what it had created. We turned on each other. Our wars destroyed not just enemies, but our own people. Eventually, it became too much. Some of us, those who saw what was happening, chose to hide, hoping that someday we could be useful again. I'm one of those. Zinna absorbed the weight of his words. So you were hidden here to wait for another war, another enemy. That's the irony, Marcus replied with a bitter smile. We were meant to protect the galaxy, but in the end, we were just another weapon to be used and discarded. Gorath, who had been silent for a while, stepped forward, his massive form towering over Marcus. Enough talking, he growled. Can you fight? That's all we need to know. Can you help us take down the core? Marcus met his gaze, unflinching. I can fight. But the question is, should I? What makes your rebellion any different from the countless others I've seen? What happens when you win? Another war, another power struggle. I've seen it all before. You replace one tyrant with another. Zinna felt the pressure of his question, knowing that their rebellion was far from perfect. They had no guarantees of what would come after victory, but she believed in the cause. We're not perfect, she admitted, but we're fighting for a future where entire species aren't enslaved, where worlds aren't stripped of their resources and left to die. We're fighting for freedom, for all of us. Marcus considered her words, his expression unreadable. Freedom, he muttered, almost to himself. I've heard that word so many times, and yet I've never truly seen it. Tenix, sensing an opening, stepped forward. This is different, Marcus. The core has turned the galaxy into a machine, grinding down everyone who isn't part of the inner circle. We're not asking you to fight for us, but for everyone who still has a chance at living a life free from that control. Marcus was silent for a moment, his eyes distant as he processed everything. Finally, he sighed. I'm not the hero you're looking for, but I'll help you. Not because I believe in your cause, because I've seen what happens when good people do nothing. Gorath grunted in approval. That's all we need. Just point us toward the enemy, and we'll take care of the rest. Tenix looked relieved, but Zinna wasn't entirely sure what to feel. Marcus was agreeing to help, but there was still a darkness in him, a reluctance that made her uneasy. She could sense that he was haunted by his past, and that made him unpredictable. Suddenly, Serian's voice interrupted the conversation. Captain, you must hurry. The core's forces are closer than you think. Their ship has already entered orbit, and it won't be long before they locate you. Zinna's heart sank. We need to move. Can you help us, Serian? We need to get out of here before the core sends reinforcements. I can disable the facility's tracking systems and delay them, Serian replied. But once they arrive, you're on your own. And they won't stop until they have what they came for. Marcus, now fully alert, looked at Zinna. If the core is coming, then we need to act now. Do you have a plan? We fight our way out, Gorath said, cracking his knuckles. That's always the plan. Tenix shook her head. We need to be smarter than that. This facility is old, but there might be hidden systems we can use to our advantage. Zinna looked at Marcus. You said you were engineered to fight. You faced worse than this, right? Marcus nodded. Yes, but this time, I'm not going to do it alone. Zinna felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they stood a chance. Let's get ready, she said, her voice steady despite the rising tension. We're going to make sure the core regrets ever following us here. The old facility buzzed with activity as Zinna's team prepared for the inevitable confrontation. Serian, the AI that had guided them this far, flickered between monitors, highlighting areas of the base that could be useful in their defense. Tenix hurried between consoles, hacking into whatever systems still held power, while Gorath paced, his impatience growing by the second. Marcus, now fully awake and focused, stood at the center of the room. His sharp eyes scanned the tactical map Tenix had pulled up, revealing the layout of the facility and the surrounding terrain. He was calm, too calm for someone about to face a brutal enemy, but Zinna could sense the war-hardened instincts kicking back into gear. We need to create choke points, Marcus said, pointing to narrow corridors on the map. If the core sends in ground troops, we funnel them through here. We can use the facility's defenses to thin their numbers. Gorath, still skeptical, grunted. And what if they send more than ground troops? What if they bring in air support or worse? Marcus didn't miss a beat. Then we need to move fast. We don't have the resources for a prolonged defense. Once we delay them here, we need to get to your ship and escape. But we need to make sure they don't follow. Zinna nodded, agreed. Tenix, can you rig the facility's systems to cover our escape? Tenix's eyes flicked between screens as she worked, her fingers flying over the controls. I can try, Captain. Some of the systems are too old, but I've found a few I can manipulate. It won't hold them forever, but it'll buy us time. Serian's voice chimed in again, this time from the ceiling speakers. I am redirecting power to auxiliary systems. That should give you access to the security measures. However, be advised, core forces are closing in. You have minutes before they breach the perimeter. Time's running out, Zinna said, turning to her crew. We need to trust each other if we're going to get out of this alive. Marcus, I know you don't want to fight again, but if there's any chance we can stop them here, we need you. Marcus looked at her, his expression unreadable. I'm here, aren't I? Zinna couldn't argue with that. She turned to Gorath and Tenix. Tenix, get ready to shut down the facility when we leave. Gorath, you're with me. Marcus, you're our tactical lead now. What's the first move? Marcus nodded, stepping up to the challenge. We need to set traps in the corridors, force them into tight spaces where they can't use their numbers to their advantage. Gorath, you're on heavy defense. I'll take the lead once the fighting starts, but I need you to cover the rear. The Endurian warrior gave a toothy grin. Finally, something to punch. Don't get ahead of yourself, Marcus warned. This isn't about brute force. We need to outsmart them, or we'll all end up dead. Zinna watched the exchange, a strange sense of anticipation building in her chest. This was their moment. Everything they had fought for would come down to this battle. If Marcus could live up to the legends of his people, they might just survive. Suddenly, the lights in the facility flickered, and a low hum filled the air. Tenix looked up from her console. They've breached the outer perimeter. Marcus grabbed a rifle from a nearby weapons rack, his movements fluid and precise. Let's move. We'll hit them hard and fast before they can gain a foothold. Zinna, Tenix, and Gorath fell into step behind him as they headed toward the first choke point. The corridor was narrow, with low-hanging pipes and exposed wiring running along the walls. Perfect for an ambush. Set the charges here, Marcus ordered, pointing to specific spots along the walls. When they come through, we blow the entrance. That'll give us a few minutes to fall back. Tenix quickly rigged the charges, her hands moving deftly as she set the timers. Charges are ready, we should. Her sentence was cut short by a loud explosion from down the corridor, followed by the sound of boots marching in unison. The core soldiers had arrived. Get ready, Marcus said, his voice calm but commanding. Wait until they're all inside. We want to catch as many as we can. Zinna pressed her back against the wall, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped in an ancient facility with no clear escape route. But somehow, with Marcus leading them, she felt a glimmer of hope. The sound of footsteps grew louder, the clanking of armored boots echoing down the corridor. Zinna could see the faint glow of their helmets as the first wave of core soldiers came into view, weapons raised, their precision terrifyingly efficient. Now, Marcus shouted. Tenix hit the detonator, and the corridor erupted in a deafening blast. The entrance caved in, burying half of the soldiers in debris. The rest stumbled back, disoriented by the sudden explosion. Marcus didn't waste a second. He charged forward, his rifle firing in controlled bursts, each shot hitting its mark. Gorath followed close behind, his fists smashing through the weakened armor of any soldier unlucky enough to get close. Zinna and Tenix provided cover from the rear, picking off stragglers as they retreated deeper into the facility. The core soldiers were well trained, but Marcus was something else. His movements were almost mechanical, each action perfectly calculated. As the last of the soldiers fell, Marcus turned back to the group. That was just the first wave. They'll send more, and next time, they'll be better prepared. Then we keep moving, Zinna said, wiping sweat from her brow. Tenix, start the countdown. We need to blow this place and get back to the ship. Tenix nodded, pulling up the facility's control systems on her wrist console. I'm on it, Captain. Serian's voice crackled back to life. I've detected reinforcements entering the atmosphere. You don't have much time. Zinna gritted her teeth. We've got enough. They fell back, navigating through the winding corridors as Tenix prepared the facility's self-destruct sequence. The clock was ticking, and with every passing second, more core forces would be closing in. As they reached the final chamber, Zinna turned to Marcus. This is it. We can't hold them off forever. We need to make our escape. Marcus nodded. Get to the ship. I'll make sure they don't follow. You're coming with us, Zinna insisted. We don't leave anyone behind. For the first time, Marcus hesitated. I'll catch up. Just go. Before Zinna could argue, another explosion rocked the facility. The core forces were closing in, and they were running out of time. Go, Marcus shouted. Reluctantly, Zinna turned and led her team toward the exit, her heart heavy with uncertainty. She didn't want to leave Marcus behind, but there was no time to debate. All she could do was trust that he knew what he was doing. As they reached the ship, Zinna looked back toward the facility. The lights were flickering, the ground rumbling beneath them. "Get us out of here," she ordered Tenix, who was already at the controls. The ship lifted off, and Zinna watched as the facility collapsed in on itself, a massive explosion lighting up the frozen moon. But in the chaos, one figure emerged from the wreckage, Marcus, standing alone, watching as they flew away. He had survived, for now. The Fury's wings shot through the dark sky of the frozen moon, the facility's remains slowly disappearing behind them. Zinna stood at the ship's command console, her eyes fixed on the scanners. Marcus was still on the surface, and she had to make sure he had a way out. The facility had collapsed in a wave of fire and metal, but she had seen Marcus standing amid the wreckage before they left. Now, they just needed to pick him up and escape before the Corps' reinforcements arrived in full force. "Bring us around, Tenix," Zinna ordered, gripping the back of her chair. "We're going to get Marcus and get the hell out of here." "Already on it," Tenix replied, her fingers flying over the controls. "But we've got a problem. Corps reinforcements are almost in orbit. We're cutting it close, Captain." Gorath, standing near the exit ramp, let out a low growl. "We leave now, or we leave in pieces. If we wait too long, we'll be dust." Zinna's heart raced, but she shook her head. "We're not leaving without Marcus." As the ship banked hard to the right, the scanners picked up movement on the ground below. Marcus was sprinting through the debris, dodging explosions and falling wreckage. His movements were precise, almost superhuman, as he navigated through the chaos. "There he is," Zinna shouted, pointing to the screen. "Tenix, bring us lower. Gorath, get the ramp ready." The ship descended toward the surface, the engines humming with strain as they hovered just above the broken ground. Gorath, already eager for action, slammed the control to lower the ramp. The wind howled through the open hatch as debris flew past the ship, but Gorath stood firm, ready to pull Marcus aboard. "Come on," Gorath yelled, motioning for Marcus to run faster. Marcus, sprinting at full speed, leaped onto the ramp with a precision that made Gorath's jaw drop. He rolled forward, landing on his feet, and immediately headed toward the cockpit as Gorath raised the ramp behind him. "Nice of you to join us," Gorath muttered, but there was a hint of respect in his voice. Marcus didn't respond. His eyes were already scanning the ship's systems as he joined Zinna and Tenix at the console. "We need to move. The Corps ships will be here in less than 2 minutes. They'll have tracking beams locked on us before we're out of the atmosphere." "We know," Zinna replied, her voice tense. "Tenix, get us out of here. Now." Tenix didn't need to be told twice. She punched the controls, sending the ship into a rapid ascent. The engines roared as they climbed higher and higher, the frozen moon quickly shrinking beneath them. But they weren't alone. "Corps ships incoming," Tenix said, her voice tight. 3 fighters and a command cruiser, and they're closing fast." Zinna's stomach twisted. They were vastly outnumbered. The Fury's wing was fast, but it wasn't a warship. They couldn't take on that kind of firepower. Marcus leaned over the console, his eyes narrowing. "The cruiser will have its shields up, but its fighters will be unshielded until they engage. We'll need to take out the fighters first before they surround us." "How do we do that?" Zinn asked, knowing their weapons weren't built for dogfights. "I'll handle it," Marcus replied, his voice calm. "Get me to the ship's turret." Zinna glanced at Tenix, who quickly nodded. "I can reroute control to the auxiliary turret, but it's manual. You'll have to aim and fire yourself." Marcus gave a quick nod and headed toward the turret without another word. Zinna watched him go, her mind racing. This man, this human, had been a mystery from the start, but now she was beginning to see why he had been so feared. His confidence in the face of overwhelming odds was unsettling, but at the same time it gave her hope. If anyone could get them out of this, it was him. As the ship broke through the upper atmosphere, the Corps fighters came into view. Sleek, black ships with glowing red engines, they moved in formation like hunting wolves, circling the Fury's wing with deadly precision. "Tenix, how long until we can make the jump?" Zin asked, her fingers tightening around the controls. "We need to clear the planet's gravitational field," Tenix replied. "Another minute or so, but those fighters are going to be on us in less than that." The ship lurched as the first volley of laser fire shot past them, close enough to rattle the hull. Zinna gritted her teeth. "Marcus, we need those fighters taken out now." Down in the turret, Marcus was already tracking the enemy ships, his movements precise and deliberate. He locked onto the first fighter, his fingers hovering over the trigger. The moment the ship crossed into his sights, he fired. A direct hit. The first fighter exploded in a burst of red and yellow, its debris scattering across the sky. "That's one," Goraf growled from behind Zinna. "But we need more than that if we're going to survive." Another burst of fire shook the ship, this time grazing the left wing. Sparks flew from the control panel as Tenix fought to keep them steady. "Marcus," Zinna shouted. The second fighter darted in close, its guns blazing. But Marcus was faster. He swung the turret around, locking onto the ship just before it unleashed another volley. He fired, and the second fighter disintegrated in a brilliant explosion. "One more," Marcus shouted through the intercom. The final fighter swooped in from above, targeting the ship's engines. Zinna felt the heat of the lasers as they narrowly missed, and the ship lurched violently to the side. "Hold it steady, Tenix," Marcus yelled as he aimed. The last fighter veered to the left, trying to outmaneuver the turret. But Marcus was relentless. He tracked the ship's every movement, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As the fighter banked hard, trying to get behind them, Marcus pulled the trigger. A direct hit. The fighter erupted into flames, its burning wreckage spinning off into the void. "All fighters down," Marcus reported, his voice steady. "But that cruiser's going to be a problem." Zinna didn't need to be reminded. The massive core cruiser was already locking onto them, its tractor beams glowing ominously. "Tenix, how much longer?" Zinna asked, her heart racing. "Just a few more seconds," Tenix replied, her hands shaking as she fought with the controls. "We're almost there." The cruiser's massive guns began to charge, a low hum reverberating through the air. Zinna could feel the weight of their impending doom pressing down on her. But just as the cruiser's weapons reached full power, Tenix shouted, "Jumping now." The stars stretched and blurred as the Fury's wing rocketed into slip space, leaving the core cruiser behind in a flash of light. Zinna let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. They had made it. As the ship stabilized in the safety of slip space, Zinna collapsed into her chair, her body still trembling from the adrenaline. Garaf let out a loud laugh, slapping the side of the hull. "Well, that was close." Zinna gave a tired smile, looking at Tenix, who was wiping sweat from her brow. "Good work, everyone." A moment later, Marcus climbed back up from the turret, his face calm and collected as if nothing had happened. "Is everyone all right?" he asked. Zinna nodded. "Thanks to you, yes." Marcus didn't reply, but Zinna could see a flicker of something in his eyes, perhaps the first sign of the soldier he once was, buried deep beneath the surface. "We're not safe yet," Marcus said quietly. "The core will track us. We need to keep moving." Zinna looked at him, realizing just how much of the burden he was carrying. He had been brought out of Creo to fight again, but it was clear that war had never truly left him. "Then we keep fighting," she said softly. "Together." Marcus met her gaze, and for the first time since they had met, Zinna saw a hint of trust. The Fury's wing drifted through the calm, starry void of slip space, the tension in the ship slowly ebbing away. Zinna, sitting in the command chair, allowed herself a moment of relief. They had escaped the core's reinforcements, but she knew it was only a temporary reprieve. The core wouldn't stop hunting them, not after what they had found on the frozen moon. Gorath stretched his massive arms, the adrenaline from the battle still coursing through his veins. "That was a fight worth remembering," he said with a grin. "But we're not out of the fire yet. Where are we heading, Captain?" Zinna glanced at Marcus, who stood at the back of the room, his eyes distant, as if he were lost in thought. "We'll head to our rendezvous point. Our fleet is waiting in the outer rim, and they need to know what we found. With Marcus on our side, we might finally have a chance." Marcus, hearing his name, looked up. "You're putting a lot of faith in someone you barely know." Zinna met his gaze steadily. "I'm putting my faith in what I've seen. You're more than just a weapon, Marcus. You've seen war, and you know what's at stake. That's why we need you." Tenix, still monitoring the ship's systems, spoke up. "The core will track our jump eventually, but we've got some time before they catch up. We should be able to reach the rendezvous point without any trouble." Gorath, leaning against the wall, eyed Marcus. "You fought well down there, human. I'll admit, I wasn't sure what to expect, but now I'm wondering why you ever thought about sitting this one out." Marcus's expression hardened, a shadow passing over his face. "Because war isn't just about the fighting, Gorath. It's about what comes after. I've seen too many battles that led to nothing but ruin. I didn't want to fight again because I know how it ends." Zinna frowned. "But it doesn't have to end like that. We're fighting for something different, freedom. A chance to rebuild without the core's grip on every world." Marcus exhaled, his gaze drifting to the stars outside the viewport. "You think you're different, but it always starts like this. You fight for freedom, for a cause you believe in. But once the war is won, someone else rises to power. The cycle never ends." Zinna stood, crossing the room to face Marcus directly. "Maybe that's true, but maybe it isn't. We're trying to break that cycle. If you don't believe in our cause, then help us make sure we don't fall into the same trap." Marcus's eyes searched hers, and for a moment, Zinna wondered if he would simply turn his back on them. But then slowly he nodded. "I'll help you," he said, his voice low but steady. "But I need to be clear. If I see this rebellion becoming what you're fighting against, I'll walk away. I've seen too much to be part of something that repeats history." Zinna let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "That's all I can ask." Tenix interrupted, glancing over her shoulder at the scanners. "We're coming up on the rendezvous point. No core ships on our tail yet, but we need to be quick. The fleet's just beyond this system." Zinna nodded, returning to her seat. "Bring us out of slip space. Let's hope the fleet is ready for what we're about to show them." The stars stretched and slowed as the ship emerged from slip space, the bright glow of the system's distant star illuminating the void around them. In the distance, Zinna could make out the faint outlines of ships, her fleet. The rebellion had been fighting for years, but their resources were limited. Their ships were patched together, scavenged from whatever wrecks they could find, and their numbers were far fewer than the core's vast armadas. Tenix hailed the fleet, her voice confident as she sent the signal. "This is Fury's Wing to Rebel Command. We're inbound with vital intel. Prepare for docking." A moment later, the voice of Admiral Venn, the leader of the rebellion, crackled through the comms. "Captain Zinna, we've been expecting you. Did you find what you were looking for?" Zinna exchanged a glance with Marcus before answering. "Yes, Admiral. We found the weapon." There was a brief pause on the other end. "Understood. Dock at Bay 3 and prepare to debrief. We're eager to hear what you've uncovered." As the ship approached the fleet, Zinna couldn't help but feel a surge of hope. They had Marcus, a human, a living legend. If anyone could help them turn the tide of the war, it was him. But she also knew that Marcus was no ordinary soldier. He had been through more than any of them could imagine, and there was no telling what the future held. The ship docked with the flagship, and as the crew disembarked, Zinna felt the weight of their journey settle on her shoulders. They had come so far, but the real battle was just beginning. Admiral Venn, a tall, imposing figure with a scar running down the side of his face, met them in the docking bay. His eyes widened slightly as he took in Marcus, but his expression quickly returned to its usual stoicism. "Captain," he said, nodding to Zinna before turning to Marcus. "And you must be the weapon we've heard so much about." Marcus crossed his arms, his gaze steady. "I'm not a weapon. I'm a soldier. There's a difference." Ven gave a slight smile. "Noted. We'll discuss everything in the debrief. But first, let me thank you for your willingness to help us. The rebellion needs every advantage it can get." Marcus didn't respond, but Zinna could see the internal struggle playing out behind his eyes. He was here, but his heart was still hesitant. As they made their way to the debriefing room, Zinna fell into step beside Marcus. "This is just the beginning," she said quietly. "I know you've seen a lot of darkness, but we're fighting for something that matters. And with you on our side, we have a chance." Marcus glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "We'll see." In the debriefing room, Zinna laid out the details of their mission, explaining how they had found Marcus and what he had told them about humanity's downfall. Admiral Ven listened carefully, his face grim as the full scope of the story unfolded. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then Ven spoke. "The core is growing stronger every day. We need to strike now, while we still have the element of surprise. With Marcus's help, we might be able to turn this war around." Marcus, who had remained silent throughout the debrief, finally spoke. "I'll help you, Admiral. But understand this, my loyalty isn't to your rebellion. It's to the people who need protection. If this war turns into something worse, I'll be the first to walk away." Ven nodded. "Fair enough. But I believe you'll find that we're on the same side." Zinna stood, feeling a surge of determination. "We'll make sure of that. This fight isn't over, not by a long shot." As they left the debriefing room, Marcus fell into step beside Zinna once more. "This war, it's going to get worse before it gets better." Zinna nodded. "I know, but we're ready." Marcus looked at her, his eyes hard, but filled with a spark of something that hadn't been there before. "Then let's make sure we win." And with that, the human who had once been hidden away as a weapon for the future had finally stepped into the light, ready to fight for something bigger than himself. The galaxy wouldn't know what hit it.